Hello everyone, and you're very welcome to today's webinar. So first off, I'd like to introduce Bright, and Bright is home to multi-award-winning payroll, accounting, practice management, and tax software. So I'm just going to give you all a very short introduction to each of our Bright products. BrightPay is a payroll software that makes managing your payroll quick and easy, and it's currently desktop-based. Accountancy Manager is a cloud-based practice management software designed to lighten your workload by automating your admin. Surf is a cloud accounts production software with a bookkeeping module, Surf Accounts. And BrightPay has direct API integration with Surf Accounts, allowing both the payroll software and the accounting software system to directly communicate with one another. And BTC Software is a tax software expert with accounts production, corporation tax, and self-assessment tax return modules, and it's currently only available in the UK. So I'm just going to add a link to the chat box now, so you can request the demo of any of our Bright products at any time throughout the webinar. We'll give you all another opportunity towards the end of the webinar if you are interested. So moving on now, we'd just like to introduce ourselves. So I'm Holly and I'm a marketing team lead here at Bright, and I'm joined by my colleague Elaine, and Elaine is the content marketing specialist here at Bright. In today's webinar, we will discuss the Statutory Sick Pay scheme and what we know so far. So we will explain what exactly SSP is and talk through some challenges that you may face. We will show you the SSP calculation in BrightPay and how it works, as well as updating your contracts of employment. We will finish up today with a questions and answer session, and we will be joined by former CEO of Bright, Paul Byrne, to answer any questions that you may have. So if you do have any questions, you can type them into the questions box on your control panel at the side of the screen, and we will try to get through as many questions as possible. This webinar is being recorded and you'll all receive an email later on today with a link to the recording, so it's no problem if you do need to leave at any stage. And if you want to download the slides right now, you can do so on the Handouts tab on your control panel. And we're also delighted to announce that this webinar is CPD accredited. So if you would like a CPD cert, please request this in the survey that will pop up on the screen once the webinar has ended. So that won't come up on the screen until the webinar has ended. So I'm just now going to pass you over to Elaine to begin today's webinar.
Thanks, Holly, and hello, everyone. Before we get into the specifics of SSP, let's firstly discuss what exactly is SSP. What does it mean? SSP stands for Statutory Sick Pay, which is a legal right for employees to be paid by the employer when they're absent from work due to illness. In the past, employees previously had no legal right to sick pay. However, the introduction of the Sick Leave Act 2022 has made this become law, and it was signed in July 2022. The Sick Leave Act 2022 commenced on the 1st of January 2023, and it will be rolled out over the next 4 years. In order to be entitled to sick pay under the SSP scheme, the employee must have 13 weeks of continuous service. Those eligible will be required to produce a medical certificate in respect of each day of statutory sick leave. Employees who require further time off after an employer's entitlement to sick pay expires may be eligible for illness benefit from the Department of Social Protection, subject to PRSI contributions. As of the 1st of January, eligible employees are entitled to 3 days of paid sick leave per year. The Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment has indicated that this will increase to 5 days in 2024, 7 days in 2025, and 10 days in 2026. Employees must have a sick cert for each day to receive the statutory sick pay. If they are out sick for 3 consecutive days, the cert must contain the sickness for those 3 days. If out sick for 3 separate sick days throughout the year, employees must issue a medical certificate from their GP for each day. This phased rollout takes into account the current pressures on businesses in terms of rising costs and inflation. The staggered rollout has been designed to avoid placing an excessive financial burden on employers. It gives them the time to plan and budget for the additional costs. There is a provision to vary by ministerial order the number of statutory sick days per year. This may be in regard to a number of reasons, some of which I'll name. However, there is a much more extensive list. So some of the reasons might be the state of the general economy, the state of society, so that means public interest and employee well-being, and the potential impact. And by that I mean the potential for any adverse impact that the making of the order may have on the specific sectors, employers, or employees. So I'll pass you back over to Holly now to discuss the challenges you may face in relation to SSP.
Great, thanks, Elaine. So the Act applies to all organisations regardless of size and headcount. So if an employer cannot afford to discharge its SSP obligation, an exemption may be granted by the Labour Court. If an employer already provides more favourable sick leave benefits to an employee, they will not be obliged to comply with the statutory sick pay rules. However, the employer will have to demonstrate that any discretionary or pre-existing scheme is more favourable than the one provided for in the legislation. Employers must review their existing sick pay schemes and policies to check whether the new SSP rules will affect or change them. So the contract of employment should clearly state the company's rules on sick leave. So it may limit the length of time you can get sick pay. So for example, 1 month sick pay in any 12-month period, or state that if you are sick and unable for work, you must contact a specified person by a certain time. So that could be, for example, a line manager or a HR manager. So it will be mandatory that employers keep a record of any statutory sick leave taken by employees. So these records must be retained by the employer for a period of 4 years. So in those records, you are required to keep information on the employee's period of employment, the dates of statutory sick leave in respect of each employee, and the rate of statutory sick leave payment in relation to each employee. If an employee does not get sick pay, although it is in their contract or terms of employment, employees can make a complaint under the Payment of Wages Act. Failure to comply with the record keeping requirement may result in a fine of up to €2,500. So if you don't already have a sick leave scheme in place at your company, the new legislation may impose costs to you. So these costs include administrative costs in relation to setting up and implementing the scheme, along with maintaining those records. So a challenge that we are all facing is waiting on further employer guidance to be published. And payroll developers have again asked the department to provide employer guidance on the operation of SSP, as it has been in place almost 1 month now. So I'll now pass you back over to Elaine to discuss what happens to annual leave when employees are off sick.
Thanks, Holly. If an employee becomes ill during their annual leave and obtains a medical certificate for the days that they are ill, these sick days will not be counted as annual leave days. Instead, they can use the same number of annual leave days at a later date. An employer cannot insist that employees take annual leave on days they are off sick, if they have a medical certificate for those days. Employees can build up annual leave entitlement while off sick, as long as they have a medical certificate. If they're on long-term sick leave and cannot take annual leave due to illness, they can carry it over for up to 15 months after the end of the year it was earned. If an employee leaves their job within these 15 months, they should get payment for the leave that they did not take due to illness. The aim of the Statutory Sick Pay Bill is to provide a basic level of protection to workers and bring Ireland in line with other European countries. Before January, there was no legal obligation on employers in Ireland to pay employees who were on sick leave, and it was up to the discretion of each employer. After an employee has used up all of their sick leave days, after 3 days of illness, they can apply for illness benefit if they have enough PRSI contributions. Different rates apply depending on the employee's earnings. The maximum for those earning over €300 is €203 per week. The rate of 70% and the daily cap are set to ensure excessive costs are not placed solely on employers, who in certain sectors may also have to deal with the cost of replacing staff who are out sick at short notice. As mentioned already, to qualify for paid sick leave, an employee must be working for their employer for a minimum of 13 weeks and provide a medical certificate from their GP to prove that they are or were unable to work. SSP guidelines for both employees and employers are being worked on. However, there's still no date from the department on when this guidance will be published. We realise this is challenging to say the least, given that the SSP has already commenced, but everyone is in the same boat, unfortunately. You should ensure that you use payroll software that caters for SSP so it's not on an additional workload. Many business owners believe that a manual payroll system is a relatively easy way to manage their payroll and can seem like the most cost-effective option. However, along with the additional time required to process payroll, a manual system can result in inaccurate payroll processing as it does not have built-in processes to catch mistakes or notify you of payroll changes. Manual records are also very difficult to maintain and store securely under GDPR and are subject to greater human error. It's important to note that late periodic submissions or a constant pattern of correction submissions will potentially result in non-compliance penalties and fines. So I'll pass it back over to Holly now to discuss the payroll side of the scheme.
Great, thanks, Elaine. So moving on to the payment side of the scheme, under the scheme, employers will be responsible for paying up to 70% of the employee's normal wages during their period of paid sick leave. So this is subject to a daily maximum of €110. The new scheme operates as a minimum entitlement and will not prevent employers from offering better sick pay provisions to their employees if they wish to do so. So I'm now going to jump into BrightPay and show you how the SSP process works. Okay, so here I am in BrightPay, and to calculate SSP, we'll just click into an employee. So I'm going to click into Angela's payslip, the first one here. And if I click into the spanner tool at Pay, using the new calculator, you can add SSP. So I'll click SSP calculation. Okay, so here it's asking me to confirm that Angela is eligible to receive SSP. So you can decide here using the SSP requirements listed here. And just to note as well that eligibility must be manually confirmed, so there's no automatic checks for this. So I'm just going to click on yes, employee is eligible. And the first time the SSP utility is used, BrightPay starts by automatically guessing the normal weekly pay and working days based on the available data. But once the SSP is set, the values are fixed and have to be manually changed if need be going forward. So the number of requested sick days is automatically determined by the certified sick days entered on the calendar, but you can also manually enter these. So today I'm just going to enter it in manually to show you how that works. So Angela was out sick for 2 days with a medical certificate. So I'm just going to enter 2 into this box here. And you can see the calculator works out how much to pay the employee. And it's great to see the formula here at the end of each row so that you can see how the figure is calculated. So just a very important note that it is up to the employer or the person processing the payroll to adjust the employee's normal gross pay if paying sick pay. So we can now press OK. And you can see the sick pay being added here to Angela's payslip. So you must adjust the gross pay figure by either typing it in here, or you can import the figure via a CSV file, but both ways are very straightforward for the user. So I'm just going to go back now to the payroll summary and finalize the pay slips, as I want to just show you the reporting tool. Finalize, and I'll click for all employees, okay. Okay, I'm done. So I know I do need to send the PSR as it's telling me up here in my workflow, but I'm just going to jump into the analysis tab. So to show you how the SSP report works, you can click on new report, and I want to include SSP into the report, but I don't see it here. So I'll just add a column and click into periods, and there's statutory sick pay. So we'll tick on that, press OK, and run report. Okay, so here we are. You can see Angela's SSP payments in the end column here, and you can customize this report as well, and you can save and edit it for future use. So I'm just going to show you how to do that as well. So I'm going to save it and change the name. And I'm happy with the dates and the employees, but you can change these as well. So I'm actually going to click to display this in the analysis toolbar, and also to save it to BrightPay Connect. So I'm actually going to show you in that just shortly. And save. And that's it. So you can see the SSP report now saved in my toolbar here at the top menu for future use. And then just to note as well, for those using Thesaurus Payroll Manager, I will link a demo of how it works in the follow-up email later on today. So the process is very similar, but I'll just send you on the separate video tutorial for that. Okay. So next, I just want to jump in to show you where the report appears if you're using BrightPay Connect. So I did just tick that box back in the analysis section. So I'm just going to log into my portal now by clicking on the green icon here at the top of the screen. So here I am in the employer dashboard, and if I click into reports, the employer, or if you're an accountant, this is where the client will be able to see their saved reports. So if I just scroll down here, and here you can see the SSP report that I had just saved. So if I click in here, you can then run the report. So say I want to just, the period type is fine. We'll run the fortnightly report and include all applicable employees. And here you can see again that Angela's statutory sick pay is here. So this is really handy for the client. So next, I just want to show you how you can send a payroll entry request to clients to enter in SSP or payroll information. So if I just click back into the company overview on the top left here, and I'll click into the requests tab, and I'll create a new request. Select the top one, payroll entry request. So here we need to select the employer, which is Holly's Hotel. So click this one, and I'm going to send it to the user Hannah McHugh. So next, select the pay period. So I'll say fortnightly and include all employees. And you can add a comment into the box too, as well, if you have any instructions. So click on submit when done. So I'm just going to scroll down here and submit. So now you can see that the request is pending at the top. So I'm actually just going to flick over to show you how the request is coming into the client for the payroll entry request, because right now you're looking at the accounting screen. So we'll just slide over here, we go. So here you can see then that you can just go from here, you'll be able to submit the payroll entry for fortnightly 2 and click in and review the summary. So that's really it. I'm going to pass you back over to Elaine now to talk about updating your contracts.
Thanks, Holly. Just before I talk about updating your contracts, for accounting firms looking to reduce the time you spend on payroll services, it's essential to create a strong, seamless workflow. From collecting employee data, sending payroll journals to your account software, all the way to producing final year financial statements, payroll should be one easy step-by-step workflow. Whether you complete payroll yourself or if it's delegated to one particular payroll processor, reviewing and revising the workflow for your practice is critical. It can save you hours of time, reduce duplicate work, and improve accuracy. To achieve this, integration between your software solutions is essential. So a poll will pop up on your screen now if you want to automatically register for this webinar on the 15th of February at 3 p.m. So we'll just launch that now, and I'm just going to leave it on the screen for a minute just to give people a chance to reply. Great, so thanks to everyone who took part in that poll. We'll send you out your webinar joining links through email later today. So let's talk about updating your contracts. Employers are obliged to ensure that employees who take statutory sick leave aren't treated any differently and should not be penalised for their absence. Penalisation includes dismissal or layoff, coercion, demotion, or transfer of duties. Additionally, any absence in relation to SSP should not affect any other employment rights, whether statutory or contract. The obligation to pay an employee sick leave will now be on the employer. Where an employee believes that their employer has failed to comply with the provisions of the Act, an employee may make a complaint to the Workplace Relations Commission. If successful, an employee who makes such a complaint may be awarded up to 4 weeks remuneration. However, the Act does provide exemptions that can be granted where the employer is experiencing severe financial difficulty. It will be mandatory that employers keep a record of any statutory sick leave taken by employees. Such records must be retained by the employer for a period of 4 years. Failure to comply with the record-keeping requirement may result in a fine of up to €2,500. Employers need to update contracts of employment and company policies accordingly, even if your employment contracts already include paid sick leave provisions. Our HR software, Bright Contracts, can help you keep contracts of employment and staff handbooks up to date with changing legislation. Bright Contracts is a software package that has everything you need to create and manage a professional staff handbook and contracts of employment. What was once traditionally an expensive, complicated, and time-consuming process is now quick, easy, and affordable with Bright Contracts. And here are some screenshots of the changes we have made in Bright Contracts in relation to sick leave. Bright Contracts have been updated to reflect SSP in both the handbook and the employment contract. In the handbook, this update can be seen in the absence and sickness section, and in the contract, the change is to the text that appears when the sick pay box is left unticked. When ticked, the customer can enter whatever text they wish about their sick pay policy. So we'll move on now, and we touched on it at the beginning of the webinar, but we just want to give you a quick reminder of who we are. Bright is home to multi-award winning payroll, accounting, practice management, and tax software. As well as BrightPay, other products in the Bright family include Accountancy Manager, Surf Accounts Reduction, and BTC software. So it's now time for the questions and answers. If you have any questions, feel free to type them into the questions bar, and we'll try to get through as many questions as possible. And we're joined by Paul Byrne, who's the founder of Bright, to answer some of your questions. So welcome, Paul, and I can pass it over to you now.
Thank you very much. I'm just looking for my unmute button there. Good morning, everyone. Now I can see there's some questions coming in here, and I'll try and go through them in order of when they came in. The first one I have here is, how would an employer know if a new employee has or has not used their SSP in their previous job? Now, the thing to point out here is that SSP is per employment, so it doesn't matter whether the employee has received SSP in their previous job during the year or not. Effectively, they could get 3 SSP days for 3 different jobs during the year if that was possible. Yeah, and obviously with GDPR and stuff like that, it wouldn't be expected that the current employer knows what happened with the previous employer. So that's the reason it is per employment as such. Another question we have here is, we have employees that work irregular hours on a weekly basis. Calculating their entitlement to SSP seems to be causing confusion. I think the answer to this one really is that it's basically the employee will get paid SSP based on the hours they would have worked on the days that they're out sick. So if they're paid at a particular hourly rate, you just calculate it on the basis of what hours they would have worked on the days they're out sick by the actual hourly rate, and subject to the 70% and the 110 maximum. I hope that answers that one.
Yeah, I think the guidance is still a bit like unclear for the hourly pay, but that is how it would be calculated. There's another question here just on who pays for the medical certificate which the employee has to supply each day he or she is sick. So unfortunately, that cost is still up to the employee to get the cert. So it is a big question at the moment that, you know, if an employee is only working a couple of hours a week and they are off sick, that actually it will cost them more to get a medical certificate from their GP. You know, that could cost 70, 80 euro, whatever the cost is, and they mightn't even be covered for that, for their sick pay. So that is, it could be something that might be reviewed down the line as this comes up a lot, but that is currently yeah, the employee will have to pay for their own sick certs.
Yeah, and as you say, Holly, it could actually end up that they don't get paid as much sick pay as what the sick cert would have cost them. And
exactly.
you know, it's
So
obviously,
they might not want to take a sick day then, because it's actually they're out more money in that sense.
yeah, and it could be very difficult to get a sick cert, you know, that quickly as well. You know, to get an appointment with a doctor that quickly can be problematic at times.
Yeah, exactly. We all know that.
Another question here. The employee has been sick since the 1st of November 2022 and so on, since the 1st of November 2022. So on the 1st of January 2023, she hasn't been working for a minimum 13 weeks as she was sick. Should the employer pay her SSP in January, employed since July 2022? I think the answer to this question is really, the 13 weeks is the period of employment, not necessarily if they were paid or not during that period. That's my understanding of the guidance, as Holly said, the guidance still has to come out on that one. But that would be my interpretation at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, they could be on illness benefit there as well. So, you know, we don't know the full history of that.
And I guess the other thing about SSP is the whole sort of principle behind it was meant to cover the waiting days as such between, you know, when an employee went out sick and when they would actually qualify for the start of social welfare sick pay. And usually that would be 3 days. I think that is the waiting day period generally. So if they're already in receipt of, you know, long-term illness benefit or whatever, generally they wouldn't be, you know, also entitled to SSP at the same time as such. So as I say, it's usually only when the employee goes out sick initially that they'd be looking at the SSP kicking in.
Yeah, I suppose it is just trying to bridge the gap, that obviously some employers don't offer sick pay, so there is that 3-day waiting period until they can get the illness benefit. There is a similar question here: if employees are off sick and no cert is produced, can you make them take annual leave for this? So really, you should give them a bit of a grace period as well, because we know that, you know, the day that you are sick, you might not be able to get a doctor's appointment to get the cert. So, you know, if they do produce the cert a couple of days later or a week later, I think that is fine to cover that. So, yeah, I would really just take your own discretion on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another question: is this available in Thesaurus Payroll Manager? Yes, it is. Just in case you missed it, I will send out an email later on today with a video tutorial on how to calculate SSP in Thesaurus. So it is the similar process. I just didn't show it on this webinar today.
Another question here: if an employee doesn't use their sick pay leave after, say, a 15-month period, are they entitled to get paid for this? The answer to that would be no. It's only if they're actually going out sick that they get paid the SSP.
Yeah. There is another question here: is there a time frame as to when an employee has to furnish employer with a medical cert in order to claim SSP? It was advised that employer has to receive same by basically midnight that day in order to qualify for SSP. Is that correct? No, I mean, sometimes it can be impossible for the employee, or as we all know, you know, they don't always have an appointment the same day that you are sick. So no, there's actually no regulation in place for that. So, you know, it is at your own discretion. It can take a couple of days, depending on the urgency and the busyness of the doctor's practice. So it is okay to issue that at a later date.
Yeah, I think it would be important for the employer to, I suppose, be reasonable in those sort of circumstances.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you know, it's the people that would be sort of enforcing this, or the body that would be enforcing this, would be the WRC, and, you know, it'd be up to an employee to make a complaint there and for the WRC to rule on it. So I think once the employer has been reasonable and has tried to apply the guidance as reasonably as possible and as you know, judiciously as possible, I think, you know, that will be fine. But as absolute guidance on when the sick, when the sick cert needs to be produced hasn't actually been issued yet, or we aren't aware of it. As part of the Payroll Software Developers Association, we haven't been given that information, and we've been pushing for it. But hopefully, the FAQs will issue shortly, and we'll be able to answer that one definitively.
Yeah, we are due some guidance in February. So fingers crossed that does come out in the next couple of weeks. Things will be a little bit more clearer then. There's another question here. If staff have a cert for 3 days or more, can staff choose to be paid 1 or 2 days for SSP, or do they have to be paid for the 3 days SSP? Like, really, it is up to yourself. The 3 days are there to try and help the employee. You know, you can't help when you are off sick. So yeah, I mean, you only get the 3 days in the 1 year to take. It's also just to note as well, these 3 sick days cannot be carried over to the next year. So the year does run from 1st of January to the 31st of December. For 2023, there's 3 sick days. So they're not really to be used as, you know, they're not incentives for holidays or anything like that. It really is to cover those employees that were not able to have sick days. Yeah.
I'm trying to imagine a circumstance where a staff might want to defer some of their SSP. It's kind of like they're nearly predicting that they'd be out sick again during the year. So I don't know, I don't know how that would happen in the real world, but maybe I'm not thinking of the circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, they're not annual leave days, but it's really there to help the staff that are out sick. But yeah, you don't get to accumulate a lot of sick days. Now, these sick days are being increased for over the next 4 years. So yeah, the goal is not to use the 3 sick days.
Yeah. The another question I see here is: Bright contracts accessible as a standalone package, or do I need to be using Bright Pay? It is a standalone, so it's not linked to either Bright Pay or to Source. It's independent to either of those. There is facilities to basically populate and import client details from, I think, either package, but you don't need to be using either package to be able to use Bright Contracts itself.
Yeah. Another question here is: the employee is being paid SSP and one of the days absent is a bank holiday. What are the options on this? So it really is whether they usually work a bank holiday. So really it's just looking past on their the previous roster. If they don't usually work bank holiday, then maybe it is a bit different in that case.
Yeah, these are tricky ones, all right, because it's, you know, as you say, whether they would normally have worked or whether they were rostered to have worked on that particular bank holiday or not. That's what's important.
Another question here: is there an option to add certified sick leave from Bright Pay from the payroll system? So yes, it is in the calendar itself. So as I showed the process of SSP, I actually entered the days in manually just to show you that you can, if you didn't use the calendar, you can actually override it yourself. But it will just flow in from what you've entered in on the payroll system.
I have another one here. I have an employee who has been on sick leave since March of last year. can I automatically pay the SSP, or do I have to wait until it is requested by the employee? Again, I presume this is somebody that's on long-term illness benefit, already in receipt of same, presumably. So these are really interesting questions, actually, because they haven't come at us before with these ones. I don't think that person would necessarily qualify for being paid SSP in this situation, because they're not going out on sick leave. And I say that the whole premise really behind the SSP scheme is to cover the waiting days between when they're getting paid normal pay and between when they receive the social welfare benefit. So I don't think that there be any requirement to pay the SSP in that case, but we will check that one out, I think.
Yeah. There's another question here. Does Bright Pay keep track of sick days taken by employees to date? And is there a warning if 3 days are exceeded? So yes, actually, once you see, the way I showed the demo was the first time that I was actually entering in SSP. So going forward, if I showed that same employee, it would actually have the history there of how many days that they had previously taken. So I don't think it will show up as a warning. I think it will just say that the 3 days is what is allocated, but you can override this yourself, so you can actually continue on and pay for, say, days 4 or days 5 yourself. So it's not as if the system shuts down and you can't go any further if they have a 4th sick day. But
Yeah,
again,
absolutely.
it's up to the discretion.
Yeah, I mean, the SSP scheme is I suppose is the minimum that should be applied in relation to a sick pay scheme for employees. A lot of companies may have their own arrangements already in place, which would be better than the SSP scheme that's been introduced here, in which case they can continue to apply that other scheme anyway. It's only in the case where they don't already have some sort of sick pay scheme in place, or that sick scheme that's in place is worse, that they need to actually, refer to this particular scheme. An interesting one that came up from that is that if a company does have an occupational sick pay scheme, and it's one of these schemes that kicks in after, say, the 6-month probation period, would that be sufficient to replace the normal SSP, or sorry, the minimum SSP scheme? I think the answer there is still a little bit up in the air, because under the minimum SSP scheme, you're entitled to receive SSP after 13 weeks of employment, rather than the 6 months, which the occupational scheme has. And in that case, it could be the case that the occupational scheme needs to be adjusted so that it kicks in after 13 weeks rather than the 6-month probation period. That question is still out there at the moment, and it's probably one that might even be resolved by the WRC when that comes in front of them, and it may even be covering the FAQs, that issue. But one other question here as well, quite an important question: is SSP taxable? Yes, it is. It's taxable as the same as normal pay, subject to PAYE, USC, and PRSI.
Great. Thanks, Paul. There's a couple of questions here from Christina. If wages change each week as on hourly rate, how do you calculate the 70%? Is it on the average? So yes, it is on the average. So it is just looking back yourself on the roster and see what is their average working days. And if they are sick on a Wednesday, do they usually are they rostered to work on a Wednesday? So that part is going to be manually if their hours change from week to week. The second question that you have there is, if you have 2 jobs, how does this work? So you actually have SSP entitlement for each employment that you have. So if an employee works 3 different jobs, they'll actually have 3 SSP days with each employer. I mean, each employer is not going to know if the employee has different working employment. So it is actually per employment SSP. third part then to that question is it mandatory to update contracts, and do you have to issue a new contract or just an amendment to the existing one? So it really is just looking at your contracts of employment, see if they need to be adjusted or changed in any way, decide as well if you have a favourable sick pay scheme, maybe you'll stick to that one and you don't need to implement SSP, but they definitely need to be updated, and really communicated with your employees as well.
Just a couple of questions here. If the employee goes home sick part way through the day, what did they get paid for that day? It can be a partial amount of SSP. So in the software, for example, you can put in 0.1 or 0.2 or 0.5 of a day, being whatever it is that they're getting paid for that day. And am I right in saying that if a person gets paid a daily rate of €200, SSP should be paid at a rate of €110, even though 70% would be €140? Yes, that's correct. 110 being the maximum daily rate payable is correct.
Great. Another question here. Do the employees get the SSP entitlement on top of their normal weekly wage? So basically, do they have their normal net plus the SSP? No, they don't get, it's not an additional payment. It really is, you will have to adjust that yourself. I did explain that in the calculation, but it will have to be manually adjusted, and it is up to the employer to do so, or the person processing the payroll. So it is just, if they get paid €200 a day, and they can receive the €110 then instead of that. So it is a manual calculation.
Okay. So I'm just trying to look for questions that aren't in duplicates.
There's one here. Can you explain the SSP not being able to be backdated? So really with this one is it can be backdated. If the employee has said that they're off on sick leave, you can just go ahead and process that. If you know that you are going to get a sick cert, and it is in the contract to say that the employee will have to issue a sick cert, and it might come back then for the next week. But yeah, you can backdate this. But only as far as January 1st, just to be clear that if they were sick in January or in December, it's not going to be effective. It's only from the 1st of January this year. There is a lot of questions in here, so just bear with us now.
Yeah.
There's people looking for more information on Bright contracts, so yes, we can be in touch after the webinar. And sorry, another question here. If you have taken 3 sick days with a previous employer and you commence a new job in the same year, can an employee claim the 3 days again from the new employer? So the answer to that is yes, but with the condition that they have worked for 13 weeks with that new employer. So if they started a job in January and they left in March, and then they started a new job and they were sick in, say, October, they will be able to, they qualify for the 3 days, but it is subject to 13 weeks in that employment.
I see one here as well. If employee is out due to COVID positive test, but feeling well enough to work, do they have to stay home and claim SSP? I don't really know the answer to that. But SSP is really only claimable if they get a sick cert from the doctor, and that's produced the employer. So I guess the answer would be yes, they would, if providing they get a sick cert for those days.
Yeah, I don't think the illness has to be, you don't need to know the illness just once they have the sick cert covered by the GP. Yeah.
SSP sick cert, is this to be kept on file only, or does it have to be uploaded somewhere for revenue? Well, we're not aware of any procedure where it can be uploaded, so it's just be kept in your own records for the time being anyway.
Yeah, I'll just take one last one here because we are running out of time, and I think we have covered majority of questions. But can days not used to carry over to 2024? So yeah, just to explain again that if an employee has their 3 SSP entitlement days and they don't take them in 2023, or they're not sick, not that they don't take them, but they aren't ill, they can't carry them over. It's not annual leave. It really is just there to help people that with those 3 waiting days that was in place over the last couple of years. So yeah, it's really just a place to help employees that are sick.
Actually, just
So
one
I
other
think,
one.
yeah.
Just one other one here, Holly. Our staff are contracted for 39 hours per week, but some often work overtime. Would the SSP be based on 39 hours or on average, and if average, over what period? I believe overtime is excluded from the calculation here. Would I be right in
Yeah,
saying that?
yeah, I would say the same. Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
what their
overtime,
normal,
yeah,
it's
it's
normal
not their
weekly pay.
normal, but yeah, exactly. So if they get a commission, say weekly, that's not really normal pay. It's the same way if they get a bonus at Christmas time, or you know, during the year, say they get a bonus in July and then they were sick in the next week. It's not going to be based on the wages that they receive for their bonus. That is not classified as normal pay, so it is just the usual working week.
Okay, well, if we've gotten that, if we've on reflection, we find that we've got any of those answers wrong, we'll send an email around to everybody.
Yeah, there
And
is
as
a
I said,
lot to
the
keep up with
FAQs,
there.
we anticipate the FAQs being out, as you say, in February, isn't it, Holly?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, they were supposed to be out in January, and there was no word, so they have said February. So you know, fingers crossed that they do come out soon, and then we can keep you all updated as we hear as well.
Very good.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us here for the webinar today. As I said, I will be sending an email later on today that will include the recording of today's webinar and a copy of the slides as well, if you'd like to look back on those. But that's it from us. So thank you everyone who joined, and a big thanks to Paul as well for the Q&A session. So we hope you all found it useful. Take care. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.